We're going to get moving. Thank you. For those of you that don't know me, my name is John Johnson. I'm an advisor at CS Insider. I always like to say I've been there since day two, when Branda and Ashna kind of got this started. It's been a pretty great couple years working with this group and meeting so many of you. Couple ground rules, not really rules, just things to do while we're on this thing for about an hour. You'll see some things down on the bottom for the chat. We would love it if you guys would drop your names. Well, we know your names. If your name isn't your profile, tell us your names. Tell us where you're from. And then we also just love kind of driving some engagement too. So if you guys want to drop your LinkedIn profiles, it's really a great way to stay connected. These conversations start here, but they continue and finish elsewhere. And we want to make sure that we're facilitating ways for those conversations to continue. You can always jump into the chat and ask questions. The thing that I always say is make sure that you are there's a little drop down in the chat for if you're going to send it to everyone or if you're going to send it to individuals. So make sure that the little blue bubble says everyone. We want to make sure that we see who you are and what kind of questions you have. We got the wonderful Bob London with us today. This evening, it depends on where you're at. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, so it's starting to get dark and cold. I got my little blanket and I got my little LaCroix, so we're gonna have a good time. But feel free to ask questions. I'm going to be, me and Brandon are going to be manning the Q&A. If it's, something that kind of, makes sense, there's going to be times where I jump in and make sure that Bob sees it. And the last thing I say is that if you want to turn your camera on, that's great. I would ask, because we're getting up into the higher numbers, that we have our mics off, unless there is an engagement moment. I don't ever want to make you not talk. But we also want to be, respectful of time, and things like that. So if you do have a question and you want to engage, that's when we'll unmute you. If you are muted or if you are unmuted and making noise, I'll probably mute you myself, just so we don't make a scene. But with that, it is an honor. Like I know that Bob and I had a little gush fest before this, but just the general idea of what Bob stands for when it comes to listening, when it comes to discovery, when it comes to understanding our customers. Him and I are in the same swim lanes, and I've been a fan of his content since I found him on LinkedIn. And this is just such a cool moment for me to learn with you guys. And I'm excited to see what comes out of this. Please enjoy as we listen and learn from Bob London.
Thank you so much, John and Brandon, and just CS Insider in general, which I have found to be, it's, yes, valuable, actionable, but like it's the biggest sort of authentic human organization. Like I feel like it's comprised of individuals, not this monolithic thing, and I think that comes through in all the interactions. And having met Brandon and John and gotten to know them a little bit, now I know why, because they're good humans. It's really good to see everybody here. And obviously, you're here to hear, I think if you're here to hear about the 5 customer love languages, you're in the right place. It's a little bit of a positive bait and switch. What I mean by that is that, yeah, it's a cute title, and we are going to talk about customer love languages, but the value that the sort of the actionable nuggets that you will be getting that you can go away and use starting, if you're starting your day, depending on where you are, or tomorrow, that you can start using these truth-seeking, I call them sometimes disruptive questions, to ask customers to reveal what's really going on, not only with themselves and what they think of your solution, but to reveal why, the drivers behind why they're asking for things or making decisions, all the way up to what's going on at the top levels of their company that are driving everything. So when I talk about these questions, you'll see a love language, and then for each love language, there's a truth-seeking question. Pay close attention to those questions, because that's the stuff you can take with you immediately to uncover your customer's love language. So I am going to take a little step back and get a little personal. We just talked about this. This has to do with my love journey. Now, when I was younger and I used to go watch a stand-up comedian, they would get up on stage and sometimes they would say, I've been married for 25 years, and somehow the audience would always applaud. So I'm going to say, and it's true, I've been married 25 years. So I mean, imagine that you're all applauding. I see some movement. There you go. Thank you very much. I'm not sure. Well, I think part of the key to the success of the relationship and the duration is understanding how we think and how we love, etc. So I'm going to now give you a little glimpse into that love journey that my wife have been on. So my wife and I have been on. Um, so let's say it's a Saturday, and my wife, after a very hard week of tough week of work, she's going to Pilates, and so she's backing out of our driveway. She's looking at the house while she's backing out. And I swear, I think this is what she sees when she's backing out of the driveway, that the house is a disaster. A few seconds later, that's not our actual house. A few seconds later, I get a call. I'm inside the house. She's in the driveway. She has paused to say the following. First thing I hear is, the second thing I hear is, can you just get outside today and like just do something with the house? It is, I think the police are going to come and it's going to get condemned. It's just a disaster. And this is, again, this is what she's seeing through her eyes. And I really believe she sees this way. And I don't blame her anymore for that. Maybe just like grab a rake, do something, grab some clippers and just, please. So I usually say something like, yeah, I'll go take a look, which is, if you'll notice, is a non-committal, right? It's not a commitment. So it gives me some wiggle room because I know I have about 90 minutes till she gets back and I can assess the situation. And so I go outside and I turn around, I look at the house, and I kind of, I like what I see. I mean, yeah, sure. I don't know, there's leaves in the yard. But everything else looks pretty good. It's the same thing she was looking at, but I see it differently. And so then she comes home and it looks like this to me. She sees the disaster area and she says, well, I guess I'll have to do it myself. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is not a love language. That is, it's trending downward at that point, the conversation. But I know how to recover. And one of the ways I recover is the next time, before Saturday, let's say, I'm out there, or let's say it is a Saturday and she left, and I'm out there like this. I've got my shovel and etc. My green overalls, and she comes home, just seeing me in the yard with that stuff, and the fact that maybe I've done a few things around the outside of the house. That, ladies and gentlemen, is she comes out, puts her little hat and boots on, and that's a love language right there. And so for those of you who don't know the book, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman, amazing. I actually think that it should be required reading, like as soon as after the first date or something. I don't know. It should be. And I'm not even that guy who recommends books like this all the time, but The 5 Love Languages, what you just heard between my wife and me is she appreciates acts of service. That is one of her love languages. Here are the others: words of affirmation, receiving gifts, quality time, physical touch. So what does that mean? It means that Gary Chapman has come up with 5 ways that he believes people experience love. And by understanding your own love language and that of your partner, you can, even if the love languages are very different, so you don't, it's like, well, I'm acts of service, why aren't you acts of service? It doesn't work that way. You have to work to understand the other person. Some of you may have already heard this before because you've read the book or you're familiar with it. I'm always impressed by how many people have read it or are familiar with the concept. So that's it. Now, why am I talking about this? Because I love understanding what customers need and think. In fact, I have this very strange statistic about myself that I've done 2,700 plus customer discovery conversations over the years. It started when I was a marketing strategy consultant, and I would meet with founders and CEOs and to help them with brand strategy and messaging and value prop. And one day, one of the founders said, just during the first conversation, I said, who's your customer? Why do they buy from you? Like, not hard questions usually. And as he was answering, I could see that he wasn't confident in his answers. And we had a moment there where we both recognized his discomfort. So I said, you know what? Instead of spending money on marketing before we know the important stuff, why don't I go do a customer listening tour for you? What is that? It is me going out and talking to your customers about them, what makes them tick when we're not around. Like, I'm not going to go ask them about you, Mr. Founder and CEO, or your company. I'm going to start by asking about them, what's going on, what problems and challenges are they having, and then we'll work our way back to how you might be, where do they see you in terms of helping them. And that was the beginning. That was 2,700 conversations ago. A lot of listening tours, a lot of work, and then more recently, a lot of teaching folks. I do training, speaking, workshops. I have an online course now. And this is the most professionally satisfying work I've ever done, is working with teams, CS teams, account management, sales, to help them have more strategic customer conversations that help customers open up and reveal their love language, which really means insights about their world. And then that opens up opportunities that we can help them, which in turn brings us retention and expansion opportunities. You don't go into it saying it's for that. You don't go into the love language conversation saying, hi, I'm Bob. I'm looking for retention and expansion opportunities. It's really about them. And then you see what happens after that. So that's what I do. And that led me to an introduction to someone in the customer success thought leadership world named Jay Nathan, who encouraged me to bring this. I had developed a methodology with questions and listening techniques. And he encouraged me to bring that to the world of customer success. And I did. And it's just been a big love fest, honestly. I mean, I love working with customer success and other groups, customer success in particular, just a very intellectually honest, authentic, fun, interesting, nice, curious group of people. So I can't say much more than that. So as someone who does all these customer discovery conversations, I realized that what I was really hearing from customers because I hear a lot of, it's thousands of hours of conversations. I'm hearing a lot from customers that really kind of feels like they're telling me how they define love from their perspective. So I thought maybe there's a theme here. I can apply Gary Chapman's love languages to customers. So the first thing I did was I looked at the existing love languages and I said, okay, acts of service could work for customers, words of affirmation, receiving gifts. It's like, nope. Quality time, maybe. Physical touch, hard stop, hard no. We're not going to use that for customers. So I thought I'm going to have to create a new set of love languages that are the customer love languages. And that leads us to the substance of where we are today. The 5 customer love languages. Number 1, this is the most basic. And these are, in contrast to Gary Chapman's, these can work. You can have, in the book, you can have multiple love languages. It's absolutely fine. Same here. But I do think that there are layers. And what I mean by that is there's something that is so basic, and it's called do what you say you're going to do. This is not you as a CSM following through and writing good notes and meeting reports. That's part of it. It's your entire company. You are the sort of the sharp tip of the spear of your entire company. The product, the communications to customers, the training, the support. I'll go back to the product because it's so important. So everything meeting or exceeding expectations. So Trevor said, what if I got a hug from my customer last week? They initiated. No, it doesn't count. It's really nice, but it doesn't count. Do what you say you're going to do. It's what I refer to as table stakes. Like, if you're not doing that, don't expect a lot of opportunities to add value, because they're still going to be coming back to like saying, hey, you're not doing the basic things that you said you were going to do. And again, I'm not pointing the finger at CS. I'm saying you're the ones who hear it, right, on behalf of your company. So what does it mean? It includes, I would say, features your product, right, which is not always in your control, maybe always out of your control. You have to consistently deliver the expected baseline capabilities and outcomes. So we all know what happens during the buyer journey before they become a customer. They hear a lot of things. They hear a lot of things from sales, maybe from others, sales engineers, and they come to believe in a certain value proposition that they are going to get by investing in the product. Then sometimes after they've been a customer for a little while, they start to say, oh, so one of the things that I thought this was going to do was X. I'm not sure it does it. X. Yes, it does. But you need to have this module added, or you need to have this training first. Okay. So keeping up with them in terms of their expectations and expectations of the capabilities of the product. And of course, because we're talking about CS, the outcomes they need, and expect. And of course, just being easy to do business with. It doesn't mean not saying no, right? Like you can't always say yes and be easy to do business with. That's not what I mean. Being easy to do business with is a comment on all the hundreds of touch points that your company has with a customer every single day. So this is the minimum viable love language, if you will. Do what you say you're going to do. And I'm going to give these to you in the order of this is the most basic. And then when we get to number 5, it's going to be the biggest picture love language. So think of it that way. Now, I promised you a truth-seeking question for each love language. So now I'm going to give you that truth-seeking question. And it's something you can incorporate into your customer conversations immediately if you think it makes sense for you and given where your customer is at this particular moment. Here we go. What's the biggest thing that surprised you since we signed the contract or since we started working together? So the power of this question is that it gets at the difference or delta between their original expectation and where things are today from their point of view. So if you want to understand this love language of, are we doing what we say we're going to do? Asking it that way, are we really doing what we say? Are we meeting your basic expectations? First of all, it's boring. They're not going to engage. This question uses the contract or the license agreement or the kickoff as a hook to get them. They're familiar with that. They go, oh yeah, it's been 6 months or 9 months or 2 years. And they're going to talk about the biggest thing, because we never ask for lists. We always ask for the one big thing or the biggest thing in these questions. What's the biggest thing that surprised you? When I first started using this question, before I started teaching it to people, but I was using it, I thought the answers were going to be I thought surprise meant negative. I thought surprise was going to be negative. It turns out 50% of the time it's positive, sometimes more than 50% of the time. It's a positive surprise. And what do you do when you hear a positive surprise? You appreciate it. Thank you. But if you start to hear the same positive surprise, and something like, we were impressed with how quickly you guys got us up and running, that kind of thing. If enough customers say that over a period of time, your customers, your team's customers, and you start tabulating, it becomes part of your company's value proposition. You go to marketing as a group and you say, we have 12 customers out of 20 who answered the question by saying they were surprised how quickly we got them up to speed. That is a differentiator for us, maybe. We think it's interesting. Can we sit down and talk about it? And we even have customer saying it on video, right, as proof, which of course, all the statistics in the world sometimes are overridden by one great customer video of customers saying something in their own words. So this is a truth-seeking question. You can use the question here from Tommy. At what point do we ask this question? Multiple times throughout the relationship? You can ask it. Don't ask it sooner than 3 months into the relationship, because they won't have a base of experience to comment on. Yeah, you can. I would. Here's when I wouldn't ask it: during the renewal meeting, right? Then it's too late. It's too late if they have an issue. It's too late to do anything about it and react. And then you're in react mode, and you're kind of convincing them that, oh, well, that's not a big deal, or why is that important to you? And that's not where you want to be. So I would say roughly 4 to 6 months into the relationship, you absolutely can. Tommy put a heart on his thing. I assume that means that I answered the question. Good. So I didn't have to ask if I answered it. Yeah, and these questions, once you see all 5, they will become your toolkit, I hope, and you'll start to realize when they're useful and what stage of the customer life cycle or journey where they're useful. Sometimes it's going to be during a kickoff or an implementation. Sometimes it's going to be 6 months in. Sometimes it's going to be closer to the renewal date. Sometimes it will be something completely different, right? You can decide. You guys, one of the things I love about CS is your company has placed great responsibility with you of talking to customers. It's a big deal, and you have that burden of, again, keeping and growing those customers. So use that same good judgment that you have to have earned the role you're in, and just you're smart. You'll see the questions and you'll say, oh, I could use that here, there, right? And I encourage you to do it and let me know how it goes. You can reach me, on LinkedIn. So I spent a lot of time on it because it was the first one and I had to explain a little bit, but that is the most basic level, right? Do what you say you're going to do as a company, and certainly you as a CSM. I'm going to roll into number 2, love language number 2. Be real. Talk with us, not at us. This is John Johnson is clapping for some
I'm
reason.
sitting there clapping away like this is just the best.
Yeah, I think one thing I learned in doing these conversations is and I learned it without intending to, that, I'm independent. I'm not a vendor. I'm representing my client when I do a listening tour or a conversation. And what I found was that it allowed me to be more bold with the questions. And I realized that the bolder the questions were, the more the customers talked. So if we think that one of these questions that you see today, if you think it's like intimidating or you hesitate to ask it because it feels like it's just too bold, I understand that. But I'm also going to say that customers love authenticity. They love it when you're authentically curious. They love it when you're candid and real. And when you are real and candid and authentic, you're basically modeling the behavior that you want from them. You don't want them ghosting you. You don't want them hiding things. You want them to be open. So if you're open, you have to go first. You have to model the behavior first. So be real, talk with us, not at us. Who tends to talk at customers? Any guesses? Have you guys ever bought a software product? Who's known
Throw it
for
in the chat, guys. Who do you think?
Sorry. Yeah.
No, you're good.
Okay.
Sales.
Nicole kind of nailed it already.
Nailed it.
Yeah. So, and I'm not ripping on sales. I'm tapping into a common perception because I don't think it was a leading question. And Nicole gets the big award here already. Agreed. No death by PowerPoint, even if you have a product expert presenting. Oops. I see my CEO's in there too, it says. Good. What does this mean a little bit more? So exactly. Ditch the script. Loosen the agenda. There really should be a part of every customer interaction where there is no agenda other than to hear what's going on with them. One of the best stories I ever heard, it was an accident. One of the folks, the teams, one of the companies I work with, one of the account managers, went to visit a customer. She had slides because it was a QBR and they needed to talk about some things, but she was prepared to ask some of the questions that I had taught, including these. And she got there to the client site. It was in another city. The fire alarm went off. They had to evacuate the building. They ended up at a restaurant. And this account manager related to me after the fact. It was really weird because we just sat there and talked. I didn't feel it was appropriate to open my laptop and start going through slides. It felt wrong and silly. So I didn't. And we ended up just talking. I asked some of these truth-seeking, disruptive questions. And at the end, she said, I learned so much useful insight from this customer. And then the customer thanked me, she said. And I said, oh, well, that sounds interesting. And she said, why are you thanking me, customer? And the customer said, because I can't remember ever having a vendor conversation where I talked about what was most important to us. I can't remember ever having a vendor conversation where we talked about what was most important to us. Shame on us. And I'm a vendor too. So that speaks to loosening the agenda. Be open-ended. Ask disruptive questions, which are the same as truth-seeking questions. Listen better. Now, the questions are designed to get people to open up. Because you can't listen better. Everyone talks about active listening. That's fine as long as someone else is talking. In my experience, when you ask some of these questions, the customer will talk 75% of the conversation or that part of the conversation. The best tool for being kind of embracing the silence on conversations, if you're virtual, is to go on mute. And I do it all the time because I get excited when someone's saying something, and it's not my place to interrupt. It doesn't help, right? Because it means I'm kind of pivoting to what I think. The key is to try and stay quiet as long as you can without getting weird about it, and use the mute button to do that. And it helps you self-edit to say, well, oh, I'm on mute. Did I really need to say that? Or is this customer on a roll here? Right. Support Don't Shift comes from a great book by Kate Murphy called You're Not Listening. It's a kind of a professional / personal book, help book. And it just means, we all know that person who, as soon as we're done talking, they start talking about themselves. They don't comment on what you said. They just pivot immediately to themselves. Don't do that with customers. Try to encourage them to explain what they just said, to go a little deeper, to ask why that's important to them. How does it tie to something their company is trying to accomplish, instead of shifting to, oh, thanks for answering that question. Now I need to ask you for something. Or what do you think of these adoption stats? Right. Listen to understand, not respond, Robert. Thank you. And don't shift to the next question. It's not a survey. I have a toolkit of 16 questions that I teach. The goal is not to ask a certain number of questions. The goal is to understand what's most important to the customer. You might find that out in one question or maybe two. So support, don't shift.
Bob, real
Good.
quick.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah. Yeah.
one of the things that I've noticed, specifically with CSMs, and this happens in my life too. This is such an important thing. The support don't shift. Um, I think with any type of discovery, like if you come into a meeting, I've got these 10 questions that I need to ask, and they start with one and they give you a quick direct answer, like most of the time you're not done. Like there is a lot of push, there is a lot of discovery that goes into, right? And I think sometimes we really rush to just kind of move, okay, great, thanks, you answered that, move on to the next topic. The great part about this and about kind of all of these processes is that you're going to find things that you didn't know you were looking for. There is a ton more questions out there that you can discover and that you can hear from your customers that open up value, that open up all, growth or strategy or whatever it is, if you just listen. And if you just listen and leave space. Go ahead and continue, but I just really like.
I
I
love
think
that.
it's especially younger CSMs tend to check a box and they just shift. Okay, great, next topic. Like if I don't get all 10 of my questions answered on this one call, the great thing is that means that I get to schedule another call. There's a
Right.
reason to do it, right?
Right.
And if you've had a beautiful moment that maybe took an hour, maybe took 30 minutes of that meeting, then they're walking away with value and they're like, yeah, I'm hungry to get on a call with you again, right? And it's not, oh, I'm sorry I wasted your time. We only got to one thing. It's the inverse of that. There is an immense value in these practices.
Thank you for contributing that. And I think I would point to what John just said as a mini masterclass of the practical application of this stuff and how he has benefited from that. And I also want to highlight, because I think you guys seem to be on the advanced side of the folks out there that I've worked with. Nicole Jackson said, I start most of my customer meetings / QBRs with the question, so how are things going? What's new? That is so huge. Now, is it a pointed, truth-seeking, disruptive question? No, it's not meant to be. One of the best things you can do is saying, so what's coming up that's really big for you? What's taking up a lot of your time, which is similar? So Nicole, that's a fantastic question. Thank you for putting that in the chat. And Laura Snyder says, design thinking, don't make assumptions. I agree, 100%. I'm not a design thinking expert at all, but I think people have commented that there are similarities here in the approach in terms of don't assume, ask, keep asking, etc. Now, speaking of questions, here's the next truth-seeking question. Hold on to your seats. It's a big one. So let me ask you this. If you got a call from one of our competitors tomorrow, how would you react? Let's say on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is you'd probably ignore, delete the message, 5 is you'd pretty much respond. Um, I believe from the reactions I've gotten over the years to presenting this question, that it is an intimidating question to think about asking from a customer success standpoint for a number of reasons. If you're feeling hesitant or intimidated by the question, it's absolutely normal. Um, what I would say is a couple things. Number one, customers love the question. They love the authenticity. Why? Because they get calls from competitors all the time. It's a part of their weekly grind. And what you want to do is use the word competitor not to get them to talk about what they're seeing in the market, but it's a question. Their answer will reveal how they feel about the relationship with your product. That's the goal. What's is to understand how they really feel. So, for example, if a customer, you ask this question, they say 5. Do not assume that there's risk. Do not assume that there's risk. Don't assume anything per the design thinking point. Just simply say, I really appreciate you being candid, because you want to reinforce that you want to thank them for being candid to keep them, being responsive and open. Why did you say 5? Now, I'm going to tell you the most common answer to why customers say 5 in my experience. Something like this. Well, it's not that we're looking around actively, but they say, but we never know where we're going to learn something new, like a new use case, a new feature, a new capability, just something not just about the sort of at the product level, but there are companies out there, vendors who do a great job of content marketing and research, and it's helpful to us to understand how other people like us are solving the problems that we have. And if a competitor offers that kind of insight, that's fine. We're not cheating on you necessarily. So it doesn't mean there's risk. That's a very typical answer that I get. And at the same time, if they say 1, don't just march off. Thank you. That's great news that we would ignore. Because sometimes, and I'll give you another frequently asked, a frequent response that I hear is, it's a 1 today, but given what's happening in our company or in the economy, or we just got a new CFO, or we're in the middle of a big ERP implementation, something's going on, and when that settles down, we probably are going to take a little step back. Doesn't mean we're leaving, but today it's a 1. And if no matter what number they give, you thank them for being candid. And if, by the way, if they do say 5 and they say it's because they want to get other insights from other companies, say to them, the follow-up is, well, is there something that would absolutely get your attention if a competitor mentioned it that would cause you to get back to them? Because then again, you're hearing like, oh, well, that our company is expanding globally. I don't think you have a global capability, but someone else might, and we want to hear what that looks like, how it works. It gives you a nugget that you can collect. And that's an insight that will help your company understand how important it might be for you guys to expand globally. So there are a million examples like that, but that's probably the easiest one to give.
Real quick, Janelle had a question that I wanted to speak to as well. Not
Yeah,
too long, but just so that we can kind of make sure we cover it. She said, how do you respond to a customer who's not interested in going that deep? This is something that we feel all of the time. Do you have like a line
hang up
that
on
you
them.
would say? Yeah, I would say put them in a different risk category and call somebody who will.
So it's interesting, Janelle. And Janelle and I have talked about some of this. It's interesting when you say deep, because in some ways we're going the opposite of deep. We're going higher. And I can't tell which question you're reacting to. Maybe it's this one, Janelle, but whether it's deep or going higher, you know, I I think that that's a fear. I think, to me, honestly, that's a little bit of a fear-based question, and that's not a knock on you, Janelle, obviously, because I think very highly of you. What it is I'm telling you the body of work. I'm not here to sell you on asking this question. I'm here to tell you that customers love the question. Never had a customer not engage in it. If they're not interested in going deep, maybe there's something else on their mind and they're wondering why you're wasting their time asking about this when there's an issue with their first love language, which is like, you didn't do everything you said you were going to do. If someone's in a mood or something, maybe there's like 1% like that. So I'm of the school that says, based on the body of evidence that I have and the experience working with teams, like the teams you guys are on, there is an unbelievably high likelihood that the customer will answer fully and fulsomely in a way that's helpful to you.
Yeah. So
Laura
Bob,
found a raise your hand thing, and I want to make sure that she's got a second, and then we'll jump over
Sure.
to you, Janelle.
okay, that's fine.
Yeah, so mine might just be really basic. What's the context of the question? So, I mean, if you got a call from, if we're asking, let's say, a client, if you got a call from a competitor tomorrow, in what context? Because
Yeah.
I mean, are you going to just hit ignore on the phone without even knowing what the context of that call is, or
You mean the
something
context of the
entirely?
competitor's outreach to your customer? Is that
Um,
what you're asking?
sure. Yeah, I
Oh,
mean, there seems to be something missing from the question. You get a call from a competitor tomorrow. About what?
oh, I've never, it's interesting that you said that. I don't, I've never had a customer respond that way. I think it's implied. The strong implication is that the competitor is trying to sell them something. Um, it could be that they're trying to invite them to a webinar, maybe, but mostly it's, yeah, the competitor wants to talk about their product and how they can get in the door. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
But good question,
That's a
because
good question.
it reminded me of the other context, which is and again, this is part of a big sort of methodology, but how do you set the context for this question, which would be a really good question for me to talk about. And that is simply, instead of just asking this question out of the blue, is to ask the customer before the meeting, hey, during our next conversation, I was hoping we could just have a little bit of a step back conversation where we ask some bigger picture questions about your business and maybe some other questions that we haven't discussed before. That way, when you do ask a question like this, it doesn't come out of left field, because we have effectively, remember, trained customers to feel like every interaction is for our benefit. Sure, we're trying to help them with their outcomes, but we have a job to do. We're going to be talking about our product the whole time. So we have to set the stage. And you'll hear some of the questions where it's more appropriate, where we're asking about them. And even this is a question about them. How would you react? Right. For the sake of time, because we've got 19 minutes left, I'm going to have to cruise a little bit. Okay,
Yep,
John and
absolutely.
folks. And I'll try and pay attention to the chat. Okay. Customer says, love language number 3. Customer is basically saying, I want you to understand the job I'm trying to accomplish, not just how I use your product, and understand the essence of my job and help me do it better. So this goes back to the what I refer to as the aperture. The aperture is the size of a lens opening in a camera. If you open the aperture, it lets in more light. You have to see the customer not as a user, maybe not even as a customer. See them as a human being trying to do a job. Your product or solution or service is a piece of it, maybe not a big piece of their success, but some. The only reason their job is important is because their company is trying to accomplish something. So understand their job, and then we're going to talk about the company aspect in a minute. And this goes back to number 2 also. They love hearing context about, well, how are other customers using this? How are other customers being successful? I'm not referring to beautiful, glossy marketing case studies from your company. I'm talking about real peer-to-peer interactions, like a community, or even just an introduction. Hey, you're in the same industry as one of my other customers. I thought maybe you guys would want to just chat and compare notes. Oh, I would love that. Those are the kinds of things that really add value from the customer's perspective, because you're helping them do their job better outside of just the capabilities of your product. Okay. Question to do this. So this is how I ask it. So a lot of times, like your job description might be 2 pages long, single spaced, very dense, a lot of bullet points, a lot of requirements, a lot of things. But often there's it all boils down to one big thing that your company is absolutely counting on you to get done this year. Is there one thing like that for you? This is so cool because you get to hear them think it through. Because guess what? They've never been asked these questions before. They're too creative for most people to ask, and disruptive and maybe intimidating. They start talking about the multiple things they're responsible for, and then well, I guess the essence of it is really this one thing. It gives you a chance, like this whole process is to help you align the value of what your solution can do with what's most important to them, their job and their company. And you can't do that until you find out what is most important to their company and to them in their role. So again, one thing your company is absolutely, and the language is very calculated, not in a manipulative way, but it's the word absolutely is very vivid. The company's counting on you, and it's true. One of the people I follow, Oscar Trimboli, wrote a great book called Deep Listening, great podcast. He says that part of the listener's job is to help the speaker clarify their thoughts. Part of the listener's job is to help the speaker clarify their thoughts. So you're actually helping them tease out something that could be very valuable to them because maybe they haven't thought about it that way before. Next, be curious about our top business challenges and priorities. I hear a lot of customer success folks saying, my customers aren't going to open up about their business strategy, what's going on in the boardroom. It's just simply not true. It's simply not true. That is a reaction to the fact that, again, we as vendors have trained customers to think that all we want to talk about is our product. If you do ask big picture questions, and I'm going to give you one in a minute, they will talk your ear off. I don't know if I mentioned it before. On average, 75% of the time they will talk in these conversations. If you use Gong or another platform to do call analytics or conversation intelligence, then you have a way to see the talk time versus listen time. And it will help you improve over time. It also, by the way, gives you a pause score, which tells you how quickly did you jump in after the other person finished talking. You know, give a little breathing room. Ask about their business, not your product. Again, remember, the context is you ask them for a little bit of step back time. It's mostly to ask about their business, not your product. One thing that I've seen, and it came from organically from one of my engagements where the team I was working with, there was something they didn't understand about the market they were serving that was huge. It was a huge omission in their understanding. So we agreed that they would have one of their ideal customer profile customers come in and do, I called it a customer reality brown bag session, where it's 30 minutes with the customer saying, in case you want to know, here's this big issue that's going on in our market that's out of our control, that's affecting all, in this case, all e-commerce providers, direct to consumer. And it was really helpful to kind of lighting up the CS team's brain about, oh, we can really empathize with that. And maybe there's some ways we can help offset it. And lastly, here on this one, replace one QBR a year with something I call the UBR. The U simply stands for you, the customer. And it's really just a little expression for me to emphasize that you have to have meetings or parts of meetings that are only about trying to find out what's important to the customer, including their top level business drivers. So here's the truth-seeking question. So if I could sneak into your next board meeting or your executive leadership meeting, what do you think is the biggest priority or challenge that I would hear them talking about? And I talked about this before, but the ability to align the value of your solution with what's most important, not to the person you're talking to, but to their company, is what creates stickiness and indispensability. Stickiness and indispensability. Because if the person you're talking to loves your product for certain reasons, but they move on, or they leave the company or get promoted, then what you're faced with is reestablishing the connection of the value proposition with another person. So instead, it's more effective, and this is what the best companies in the world are good at doing, establish the value connection between the product and what they're trying to accomplish at the 30,000 foot level of their company. There won't always be a direct connection there, but there might be a second order connection. And again, you guys are smart. If you listen to what their company is trying to accomplish and what you know what your value prop is of your product, you can maybe connect the dots with one or two sort of layers in between. Next, bring us new ways to address challenges and priorities that are on our horizon. So this is basically the innovation thing, right? How would you know what to innovate as a company if you don't understand the problems your customers are facing down the road? There's an expression, customers are obsessed with, I'll use the love one. Customers fall in love with the customer's problem before you fall in love with your own solution. I think that's how it goes. So that's what this speaks to, is understand what where they're headed, where they're going, where they're trying to go as a business, not just the person you're talking to, right? How do you do that? I recommend strongly a customer listening tour. What that means is take one or two of these questions, spread them out through different folks in your team, and use them in 4 or 5 calls each over a couple of weeks. Come back and compare notes. When we asked what the biggest surprise was, when we asked, there are other questions that probably speak to this on my list as well. But when we asked about the board meeting priority, what are we hearing? If we're hearing the same things over and over again, then it gives us the insights to create some sort of report, and backed up with videos from the customers saying this in their own words, that you can then go to marketing with, or go to the product team with, or go to sales with, and say, here's what we're hearing as a group, as a CS team. We're not sure exactly where to take it, what to do. We're not telling you to build something new. We're saying we'd love to explain it to you and collaborate with you on how to address it. And to me, that is the going forward value proposition of customer success. We can talk about outcomes and value and all that, and checking boxes. But if customer success can more effectively become the voice of the customer instead of just addressing each customer's needs, it's a huge opportunity and very high impact. The question that aligns with this one is very simple. And I don't think I even invented this. I'm sure I didn't invent it. Some of you may have heard this. So if I give you a magic wand, what's the first problem you use it to solve? Now, the trick is, they're probably thinking, oh, this is a vendor question, so they want to know what they would fix in their product. Not necessarily. It's important to ask about their whole world. What problem would they make go away of anything that's in their kind of ecosystem? It could be their job, it could be their team, it could be the way they interact with another group. And this is one of, not the only, but one of the questions that gets them to talk about what would their dream situation look like. And then you have the opportunity to ask, how does that tie into what your company is trying to accomplish? What you told me at the board meeting, everyone's trying to get, everything needs to move faster. Like, it's a slow organization. There's a new CEO trying to move faster. Does this tie into that, and how? And what you find is, and it's so important, this whole approach is, customers are experts in what they do every day. They're not experts in the product, nor should they be. They don't want to be. And I don't think you should want them to be. They are experts in what they do and what their business is. So tap into that expertise. That's why they talk so much and open up so much, is because you're talking about things that they know, instead of dragging them through, things that are going to help make the case for the value of your solution. I'm not saying don't do the latter. I'm saying they'd rather talk about the former. So get them talking about that first, and then they'll probably be more open about discussing things that are going on with the product. Okay. Okay. Anybody who, if you like to take screenshots, I think we're going to make the video available. There is a
we'll be hosting
screenshot
this on our YouTube channel for sure.
Oh, yeah, cool. So I took the liberty of compiling everything you just saw on one screen, the love languages and and what they mean. And I think that those questions are great tools to dig in and get customers to open up, to reveal what's important to them, AKA their love language. And think of it this way. I want to go back to where I started, is that there's this sort of explicit table stakes. Like, this is the stuff that they agreed to with you, that you both agreed to, right? When they started working with you. But all this other stuff, it's the stuff they're not pounding on the table for, which means that the competitors aren't probably asking about this either. It gives you a tremendous opportunity to uncover the unspoken, latent, unexpected value that they see potentially, and to interpret that into things that you or your solution or your company can address. So think of it as, this is how you keep, this is how you grow, and this is the innovation domination level, where I'm telling you, look at any company that you think is successful, that you admire, and they're doing this really, really well up here. I'm going to quickly pivot. I talked about the UBR. I think I owe you an explanation of what it is. There's this great movie quote, hey, that's enough about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think of me? That kind of encapsulates the way customers feel about vendor interactions. So let's see what we can do about that. Here's an example. This is a vendor love language, right? Hey, we'd love to meet 4 times a year to make sure you're getting the value and outcomes that you expect. And the customer's thinking, and you're, but the reality is you just want to make sure they're not leaving, right? Um, Here's how the vendor experiences that. It's not their love language. They're thinking, okay, so I have 15 companies in my tech stack and you all want to meet 4 times a year? And candidly, beyond that, the meetings always seem like they're about you and your product. So that's QBR fatigue. And what I found in working with a bunch of teams and of course talking with many customers, if you simply turn the conversation around to them, shine the spotlight on them and their needs without pivoting back to what you want to talk about, you will get better engagement, a lot more insights, and uncover more revenue opportunities. And I would imagine that if you're like every other CS team out there, there are questions and demands and objectives regarding contributing revenue to your company, to your company's success. So I want to quickly give you, so yeah, there's this thing called the QBR. There's lots of slides, maybe too many. This one, the UBR is none. And then we're talking like a 20-minute meeting or part of a meeting, right? The agenda is completely open-ended, only about them versus the tightly choreographed agenda that we have with most QBRs. What the deep dive is understanding their top-level business challenges and priorities, as opposed to a deep dive into your features, stats, et cetera. And when you think of value in the UBR, it's to help understand how they define it on their terms. It drives me nuts when I hear that, oh, the renewal conversation went off track because we thought that they understood that the value would be this, and it turns out that we were helping them achieve this other value. We have to ask how they define value, as opposed to the QBR, where too often we're in a position where we have to prove that we're adding value or defend because they don't think we're adding value. So what I would submit to you is that if you have a UBR once in a while, or this sort of UBR type conversation using some of those questions, it'll make the next 10 QBRs more successful and engaging and relevant to the customer because you've fine-tuned your understanding of what's important to them. Your focus should be on just simply asking disruptive questions instead of asking them for things you need, and the engagement will flip around. They'll talk 80% of the time, 75, 80% of the time, as opposed to you having to talk the whole time. I think one of the burdens on CS is the feeling that we have to have all the answers and talk. Be the student. Be the student. Very important. And the outcome is, how can you position your solution to align with what's most important to them, as opposed to the outcome being, let me see how happy or unhappy they are, red, yellow, green, so that we can update our forecast. So that's what the UBR is. The two sort of use cases for what I call the UBR. One is just replace one QBR a year with the UBR. Instead of having every meeting being about the product, have one meeting a year. It could be as little as 30 minutes. It doesn't have to be a full hour. Customer will love it if it's 30 minutes. That's open-ended, just about them. You contextualize it by saying, hey, we just want to take a step back and understand some of your broader business challenges and priorities. That'll help us understand what value means to you in the bigger picture. No one's ever turned that down that I'm aware of. No customer. And as I said, you can gather insights to improve improve that customer's status, but also improve workflows in your team, best practices, but also, as I mentioned, sharing with other teams to help them understand what's really going on with the customers at large. Or you can take an a currently scheduled QBR, EBR, any other cadence call pretty much. And you can say before it, you say, hey, at our next meeting, we'd love to just maybe take 10 minutes, take a step back and ask some kind of 30,000 foot questions about what's going on in the business on your end. And to free up that 10 or 15 minutes, it looks like what's emerging, it's not just me, but the best practice is, for gosh sake, send the slides in advance. There's nothing so sacred about the slides that you can't send them in advance, as long as you send a little Loom video, like a 2-minute video with it saying, here are the slides. You don't have to look at all of them, but to save time in this video, I'm just going to tell you the 2 or 3 things that we want to focus on, and then you can take a look and see what you want to focus on. And it shows so much more respect for the customer when you're time shifting, allowing them to time shift. Let them look at the slides when they want, instead of insisting on this sort of this showmanship of, we have these 40 elegant slides and they have these stats. I'm not hating on all the slides and how you guys do it today, or if you're doing it that way today. I'm just trying to tell you how the customer perceives it. And the other thing that's just a little footnote: introductions in meetings take way too long. Just send in the agenda, just have like LinkedIn bios or something, or what everyone's role is. It drives me nuts when it's 9 minutes after the hour and people are still introducing their massive team on the vendor side. So there are 2 ways you can apply the UBR. So what I love most is how kinetic this all is, meaning hearing that it's whether it's working or not, just hearing what happened, hearing your experience, hearing your questions. I would love if you reach out on LinkedIn. You can also email me. If you're interested in this concept of the UBR, if you want to learn more about it, I do offer more information and a class. So feel free to hit me up at this link or this QR code. And it's 6:30, so I apologize for going right
No,
up
you
against
hit you hit the number right on the head, man. Good
Well,
job.
I got one more thing. Can I do it? Can I do it?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. A couple days ago on LinkedIn, I posted, it was really on the spur of the moment, a little challenge of what do you think is a customer love language? And this is mostly people who I'm assuming had not seen this presentation. And I asked people to submit on LinkedIn, and they did. And it was really fascinating. So I told them that if they submitted, I was going to pick the top 3 answers from my perspective and give them a free version of my online course on radically authentic discovery, which is what this whole thing is called. And I'm pleased to announce the 3 people who are getting a free version of my course because of their love language submission. They may or may not be on this call. I did see one of the people here. So Sam File, I think I'm pronouncing that right, Jasmine Torres, whose name I saw here earlier, and David Lapidus gave very inspired answers. Most importantly, what they did was they phrased it in the customer's voice, not a vendor voice. So, and that was my instruction. So congratulations. I'm reach out to these people individually to get their email address and get them all registered and stuff. So, John, I apologize, and Brandon, for going a little bit long, but I hope it was useful.
Yeah, 3 minutes over is still like on target for us, really. Well, great guys, thank you so much. Like we said throughout a little bit, we're going to be hosting the recorded version of this on our YouTube channel. It'll also be linked in an upcoming report once we get that posted. So if you haven't signed up for the CS Insider newsletter, make sure you do that at csinsider.co. We're so excited to continue these types of things, and it's because of folks like you that show up and interact. I just encourage, if you learned one thing, you talked about like the question that like drives value, forget the term that you use, but like if you learn one thing and if you grabbed a screenshot, share it on LinkedIn. I know there's a lot of guts, some people are not into like the LinkedIn thing, but there is a force multiplier thing here, right? So we learn by talking about this stuff. And the last thing that I'll say before we say goodnight or good morning, wherever you're calling from, is make sure that you're not self-selecting yourself out of these things. If you're saying in your head, well, this doesn't apply to me, and this doesn't work for my special scenario. Like CSMs are so good at saying, oh, that doesn't work for me, or I need to try something else, or this didn't work before. Find somebody else that was in this session, or find somebody else that and really talk through this and bring it home and kind of find some grounding to how these types of conversations will lead you into an outcome that works well for your customer. There's a lot of nuances. There's a lot of niches. We all want to be special, right? But sometimes we lose a lot of value that way. So I encourage you to continue these conversations. Reach out to Bob, reach out to me, to Brandon, and to everybody else on this group. We're just grateful to have you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, John and Brandon. Really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, everybody. Great questions. Have a good evening, night, morning.